Okay, so I'm Paul Butterworth. I'm an Enterprise Technology Strategist at Microsoft. I've been here 18 years. I look after virtualization and management technologies for Microsoft in Europe. So the Dynamic Systems Initiative is an initiative that Microsoft created to really change the way that computing works. So what it basically looks at is automated computing. It's the concept that today lots of systems are managed manually, so lots of people get involved and lots of process and so on. And DSIs are changing all of that so that basically systems can work and manage systems, so that things like deployment, patch management, bringing new systems online, taking them down, extending and expanding services can happen, all without people's intervention. It's a long project. It's a 10-year project that we've had since 2003, and really we're sort of halfway through now. So lots of technologies like virtualization, a lot of the stuff that we're doing in System Center is helping to start to build some of those. So some of the things that we've already got working are things like workload provisioning, where you can say, okay, so I've got a database running 3 or 4 SQL servers, and suddenly a large number of requests comes in. Maybe it's a busy time of the month, or some new ad's gone out and there's a lot of promotion work that needs to be serviced, so lots of web requests are coming in, the requirements go up, and normally at that point the systems would just sort of freeze. They would go up to 100% capacity and that would be it. The ability to go and actually extend that workload is very difficult. With DSI, we basically just go into the data center, pull some more servers, extend the capabilities of the solution, and then just provide support. At the same time, when we recognize the workloads goes down again, we'll automatically go in and relinquish some of those servers, letting the system work and providing those resources to other applications. So, you know, there's lots of work going on by people like hardware vendors. They can develop hardware solutions where they turn off processors, they turn off memory banks because they're no longer needed. So on Sunday evening, many of your systems will be there, but the minimum amount of power will be going into them, or they might not even be turned on. Monday morning, as the requirements grow, then those systems will start to be used. So DSI is really the future of automated computing at Microsoft. So Virtualization 360 is really the concept that you can take many virtualization technologies, not just server virtualization, and work them together into a strategy where lots of new scenarios can happen. So the industry is really focused around server virtualization, virtualizing workloads that are in the server and helping to do things like server consolidation. However, things like application virtualization, desktop virtualization, even profile virtualization are key aspects that you can bring together into a strategy. So as an example, you know, if you go and use an internet cafe machine, because your profile is not virtualized, you're using a profile that was just created on that virtual machine. So most of your settings and so on don't make any sense, and people just accept that today. In the future, things like profile virtualization will allow people to go anywhere and have all of their settings follow them around. When they build new machines, they don't have to back up and restore all those settings. They just live somewhere in the web and they get pulled down. Similar with things like application virtualization, you know, the benefits of server virtualization from a cost benefit are great, but application virtualization is where a lot of people spend a great deal of money doing things like regression testing, software delivery, fixing problems when they're out there. With virtualization, users can take on a lot of the jobs that they normally do, like provision their own software, repair their own software, deploy their own software. And these are things that normally you have to pay a lot of money to an IT workforce to do. And those jobs can be allocated further down the stack when people like users get involved and start spreading some of that work around. So really Virtualization 360 is about having a number of virtualization technologies, and secondly, having those virtualization technologies working together as part of the strategy. So the cost savings are absolutely there. You know, many of the things that are provided today can be reduced, or the costings that people have will be reduced. So things like supportability, things like provisioning, even things like power and so on for the physical machines that you're running will all be reduced. Where the real significant cost savings come in is when you start to use the DSI strategy on top of that, using virtualization to remove people from the mix. As an example, if you've got, let's say that service again, it's running 4 SQL servers, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and one of those servers fails, and actually a lot of stuff's going on. Maybe they're a global company, they've got a lot of transactions coming in from overseas. Losing that 4th server is an important part of that service, and they're going to have some problems if they don't fix that. Normally what they'd have to do is get a guy there 24/7 to make sure that everything works. So the shift to virtualization, although they've saved some money on hardware and those sorts of things, it hasn't saved them anything in terms of the money that they spend to look after that, because they're just doing the same thing in a virtualized space. Using DSI means that you can say, well, actually, if we lose a server, it doesn't matter, because we'll just bring up another server in its place. If we actually find that 4 servers is not enough, we don't have to have someone there to say we need 5 or 6 or 7 servers. DSI does that for you. DSI knows what the rules are about how much power it needs and how much power it doesn't need. And so it uses things like System Center, our management products, to produce the right match for the requirements coming in from the user community to the technology that you provide. So when you use the two together, when you use virtualization and then you use the benefit of automated computing, that's when you start to see real cost benefits. So probably the biggest project that I'm proud of is one that we did for a company, a pharmaceutical company in the UK. And what they were doing is they were looking at spending about $40 million moving 9,000 applications from Windows 2000 to Windows Vista. And we worked with them to try and understand what they were going to do. And they were going to spend this $40 million to buy a lot of new hardware, and a significant chunk of it, about $15 million, was going on regression testing of all the applications. So they were moving 9,000 applications from Windows 2000 onto the new platform, and they basically had not made any business rules or business decisions about what they were going to do. They just audited the environment and said, look, there's 9,000 here, we need to get them on the other side. So we sat down with them, we told them about 2 things. The first one is that using System Center, they can actually go in and find out not only what software is out there, but also how it's being used, who it's being used by, and so forth. And that actually means that they can reduce, and they actually got down to about 5,000 applications, because many of the applications that were deployed in the old environment, they didn't need in the new environment. They hadn't been used for many years. They were only used very frequently by a couple of users. There were different ways of delivering those applications, and they didn't need to put it in the platform. But the biggest problem was, how do you get 9,000 applications all tested with each other? And the application virtualization technology from Microsoft was what we focused on there. And so what they did was they used AppV to actually remove all of the regression testing. So instead of moving sideways, they moved it up to the cloud. So they moved 5,000 applications up to the top, and then they created policy on the user's machine to say, this user's got this application and that application. It didn't matter what way the applications went down and so on. The applications just didn't touch each other. So we took that spend from about $15 million to about $4 million in terms of getting things moved across. And that came straight off the bottom line of the project, so they actually came in under budget. So virtualization in the future will just become commodity. Many years ago, things like file and print, things like terminal servers or multi-user Windows technologies were sort of the fashionable technologies that were around. They were very expensive, they were very difficult to deploy. People would go on 10-day training courses to do file and print sharing. And at the time, it all seemed very relevant and very reasonable to do that sort of stuff. Today, it's not. Things like file and print, things like terminal servers, they've been built into our server technologies for many years, and anybody can just pick them up and use them as they feel fit. The same thing will happen with virtualization. People will just come to expect that there are different ways to deliver applications. Some of them are virtual, some of them aren't. There are different ways to run servers, and depending on the types of requirements, for performance on a box is always going to be better than on a virtual box. So there are still reasons why that will happen for some time to come. There are still supportability on some applications, but over a period of time, those limitations will disappear. And so it will really be based on which technology gives us the best bang for buck, which delivers the most value in a particular environment. And that's what will happen to virtualization. People will just make a business decision about how they want to architect a solution. And virtualization won't be something that they have to go in and add to the project costs or consider whether they're going to use it. It's just one of the things that they can use in the arsenal of things that they use to solve the architectural problems.